let's talk about a Horror of Dracula. Are you ready?
Yes. Dracula or the Horror of Dracula, right?
Yeah, Dracula. They renamed it.
I was very confused, Tim.
I
was so worried.
They were. That's part of why they renamed it was to help statesmen, Americans like us, because they didn't want people to get confused with the Bela Lugosi Dracula, which was. So what happened with the Bela Lugosi Dracula around this time was that it was in heavy, like, there was a package called shock theater on TV, because TV was kind of like this new big thing, and it would show the old Universal classics, and Dracula was like, it was featured on that around the same time, so they renamed this Horror of Dracula in the United States so people didn't get confused.
Which is fine. They didn't realize, obviously, that it would be confusing now.
Right.
It probably made things much less confusing back then. But it's confusing now, because I knew that there were like 9 of these Christopher Lee Hammer movies.
And they all have.
And I had no idea what the first one was. And so I'm like searching around for Dracula, and I'm getting nothing. And it's funny. It was watching me bumble through Amazon Prime to rent this thing was pretty fun.
Well, you just rent multiple Christopher Lee Draculas.
I think I almost accidentally rented like 2 separate ones.
You got to be careful with a couple of them.
Yeah, I've heard. Anyway, okay, yes. Horror of Dracula from 1958?
Yes.
All right, do we get a time machine sound?
Hit me with it.
Oh, man.
What was that? What was that based on? What was that inspired by? Okay.
Felt right.
The Dracula theme in this is kind of supposed to sound like you're saying Dracula, like the syllables of Dracula.
Oh, sick. That should have been the time machine sound. I like my surf music better.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Christopher Lee, a big surfer.
Probably is. That guy's a Renaissance man.
Yeah, he is very much.
I mean,
yes. Very much a Renaissance man.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to do the time machine a little bit different this week.
Okay.
I am going to get us caught up. We're in 1958.
All right.
I'm going to get us caught up on kind of the history of Hammer Studios leading into this movie.
Please do. This is I think I mentioned on the previous, this is a blind spot for me, so I'm very excited to.
So, we're going to lead up right here to 1958 when Dracula or Horror of Dracula was released. There are 3 people we got to talk about when we talk about the formative years of Hammer Studios. William Hines, who was like a comedian, who was a businessman. He was also a Renaissance man as well, but he owned a number of like seaside theaters. And his success in theater led him to registering his own company, Hammer Productions Limited, which took its name from a district in West London called Hammersmith. Next up is Enrique Carreras. He was a Spanish immigrant and former cinema owner who Hines met around the time that Hammer completed its first film, The Public Life of Henry IX, which was a 60-minute comedy. The 2 men formed a film distribution company called Exclusive Films, where Hammer produced a handful of movies for Exclusive Films. The one movie was actually starred Bela Lugosi in it. It wasn't. I don't believe it was a horror movie. It was called The Mystery of Mary Celeste.
That's cool.
Bella took a lot of. Bella needed money, so Bella would take a lot of parts basically, and not all of them were big parts. So, then the third person is Robert Lippert. He was an American film producer. Hammer had actually declared bankruptcy early on and stopped making features in the late 1930s, only a year or 2 after they had started. So Hines went to fight in World War II, but Exclusive, in a limited capacity, continued to distribute throughout the 40s, distribute films until after the war ended and Hammer was reborn in 1945. It was then that Exclusive signed a 5-year contract with Robert Lippert Productions. Lippert was a producer of action films, but it also gave Hammer and Exclusive access to fading but still popular American movie stars, and most importantly, an appeal outside of Britain. Even if they were B movies. All right, so those are the 3 like main players in the early days. Now we're gonna get into the prime years of Hammer horror because we're there. 1954 is where we've got to start with the Quatermass experiment. The Quatermass experiment is Hammer's first stab at horror. It's more of a science fiction horror movie, as those were kind of in vogue at the time. If you remember, like the 1950s sci-fi horror was like the big thing.
Yeah.
It was based on a BBC television serial written by Nigel Neal. Nigel Neal, you may remember, is the screenwriter of Halloween 3. Carpenter was a big fan of the Quatermass series and Neal's work, so he brought him on board, and it did not turn out the best. Halloween.
No, that situation was not great.
No.
But I believe Carpenter, I mean, certainly was a fan, regardless of how Halloween 3 worked out. I think he wrote Prince of Darkness under a pen name of Quatermass.
Right, yes.
Alan Quatermass, I
yes.
think? Yeah.
I don't think there was any ill will between the two of them.
No, I just don't think it was a good collaboration.
It wasn't good, and I believe by that time Nigel Neal was very bitter with a lot of things, and that comes across in Halloween 3 big time.
Yeah.
But the Quatermass experiment was a success for Hammer, and it directly led to Hammer making The Curse of Frankenstein, which we do have to talk about a little bit because it's an incredibly important film, not just for Hammer, but for horror movies as a whole. So that came out in 1957. And where we were in 1957 were the Universal monster flicks and the legends that started them had been kind of out of sight for a while. We're past that classic era, past the monster rallies of the 40s. Bela Lugosi actually passed away in 1956, the year before Curse of Frankenstein was released. But there are a couple of important things at play here with Curse of Frankenstein that kind of account for why it was such a success. One of them were the horror movies that were being made around the time we talked about, the science fiction horror. It came from outer space. Them, the Howard Hawks, The Thing from Another World. If we're talking Universal, The Creature from the Black Lagoon. And in its own way, Frankenstein is kind of you could make the case that it's kind of a science fiction horror movie.
Yeah, it skirts the line, I suppose. Yeah.
Because, of course, it's kind of a mad scientist movie as well. So if we're going to pick a classic monster to release along those kinds of movies, Curse of Frankenstein's monster is probably a good one to pick. The second, and we talked about a little bit, actually occurs later in the year 1957 in October, and that kind of exemplifies the growing appetite for the classic monsters, and that is that Shock Theater. Shock Theater is a package of 52 classic Universal horror movies released for television. Dracula, Frankenstein, The Mummy, The Wolfman, all of those classics were included with this package, and it was a huge hit, and it boosted ratings in like key television markets like New York, LA, all of the big markets. It killed in the ratings, and it directly led to things like Famous Monsters of Filmland, which came out in 1958, and also renewed interest in a lot of those horror icons and those big classic monsters. Lugosi actually, it's kind of a shame that he passed away the year before because it gained him a lot of fans after
the fact.
He actually became more popular in some ways, kind of like a cult figure.
It's funny because I for whatever reason, I see that Lugosi passed in 56?
Yes.
And I go man, did he die young? And then I look and I'm like, no, he's like 73. He was born in 1882. It's insane. I don't know.
And
it just blows my mind.
And he put his body through a lot too, Bela Lugosi. So and by the end of it, the final years of Bela Lugosi are kind of sad when you read about them. But the rebirth and popularity kind of makes sense when you think about it, because kids that grew up on these monsters were now revisiting them as adults and maybe even looking for more adult versions of those characters that they loved. And that's where I think the Hammer reimaginings enter and why they became so popular. But The Curse of Frankenstein led directly into the movie we're talking about today, The Horror of Dracula, and also The Money, Hound of Baskervilles, and a series of sequels to those films in the next decade or so. So that's where we're at now in 1958 with The Horror of Dracula.
Kind of interesting that we're talking about a movie from 1958 that was in a lot of ways created as to scratch that nostalgia itch.
Right.
Isn't that crazy? Because we're living through that right now, big time. We have been for the last decade or so. And I think it's even more so now than it was. With the advent of streaming, I think it's becoming even more prevalent than ever, where it's anything that has an existing brand or IP or anything that has a nostalgic quality to it, people are jumping on and making new content, whether it's a revival of a show or we're kind of not doing the remake thing as much. We're doing the Lego-sequel thing. I think has taken the place of the remake, including the new Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie is a Lego-sequel. But man, it's funny. It's just this is what we're doing. You see a lot of people kind of talking about in the film conversation about how so much of what's out there in movies and television are oftentimes it seems like just kind of pandering to a nostalgic crowd for something, and that might be the case, but I think to act like this is something that is new is
disingenuous, wrong.
I think it's just, I think it's more obvious now, maybe.
I think there's more of it,
and there's just more content.
That's kind of the other thing too. Is that's what
there's more of it.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny as we go back because we're talking about all the streaming age and stuff, but this is kind of around the advent of television.
Yes,
and what's playing into that is old movies that people have a connection to from when they were young,
and we're hitting the first. In terms of film, we're now hitting the first. Legitimately the first time period where people can be nostalgic for film.
Right.
Good point. Really, you know what I mean? This is the first. This is, I think, the 50s are the first decade where people can feel nostalgic about a film that they saw when they were a kid.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That wasn't a thing before, really.
And you've also, I'm sure you've got plenty of I'm sure there are plenty of the 1950s kind of ironic hipstery type people, kind of laughing at a little bit how goofy at some points Bela Lugosi's Dracula performance is and how campy it is. So
of course, there's an element of that too. But it's always interesting to look back and go, man, when people say that things, there's these waves of things coming and going, and this kind of history repeating itself in certain ways. It's totally true. Totally. Yeah.
All right. So I have seen this movie before, a couple times now. I think actually. Is this your first time watching this one?
It is.
So as a new viewer, and you're familiar with Hammer Horror, what did you think of this movie as a first time watcher?
Yeah. So I went in with I honestly went in with zero expectations because. When I say Hammer's a blind spot for me, I mean it in every sense of the word. I don't know the history of the company. I don't know. I had no idea how many Hammer Dracula movies there were with Christopher Lee in them. I knew there were more than one. I don't know what Hammer's vibe is. It is a full blind spot for me, and I think that was good because it's rare now going into anything without any sort of notion of what it's going to be. It's hard this day and age, so it was really fun for me to do that. And I always value these movies because we don't talk about a lot of. Generally, when we talk about a movie, at least one of the two of us has seen it.
Right.
Not all the time, but generally. And this was fun because it's been a little while since we've talked about a movie I feel like that I haven't seen. And I remember this one kind of takes me back to when we talked about The Abominable Dr. Phibes, which is a different movie entirely. But I remember watching it and just going, man, for a movie that, an older movie, I feel sort of refreshed by that because it's new to me. And a lot of the time I forget what it feels like and the thrill that you feel. And it's this distinctive, anybody out there listening, I think, knows what I'm talking about. But there's this thrill, not when you discover something necessarily, when you're like, oh, I'm the first person in my group of people to see this. Now I can suggest it. That's exciting. There's a thrill when it's the first time you are seeing something, and it opens up kind of a new branch of entertainment for you, movies, whatever it is, music, books. That there's a thrill and excitement about that, of discovery, right? And I got that with this movie, and I do. I think the movie it's brisk. It's in and out in 80 minutes, maybe less. It's brisk, and it's definitely a Cliff's Notes version of the Bram Stoker novel. So
you've read the novel, correct?
Yes,
okay.
I have. Yeah.
I read it for the first time a couple of years ago.
Sure,
so
and I like it. Obviously it's an old book. There's elements where you go, some of the language and stuff I remember being a little bit bogged down by. Certainly, it's a story that you have to. It's not an easy read at all times. I think it's a worthwhile read. I've never certainly didn't think it was a waste of time. I think it's a very important text in literature and certainly in horror. And I think for its time, it was really kind of genius. I think it was really this gothic kind of romantic horror story. And but this takes that and it kind of it remixes Stoker's story. And I think it mostly does it for the better because this is a film that or a story they wanted to tell in an hour and 20-some minutes. That book is not an hour and 20-minute movie. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not. Some books I think you can boil them down into like a 90-minute movie and make everything hit all those big notes. I think Dracula is not one that you can do that with. I don't think it's doable. And I think Bram Stoker's Dracula from Coppola is certainly, I think, the most faithful adaptation that I've seen when it comes to the book, the original text. But I think it's almost too faithful sometimes, and I think that makes that film kind of boring at times, or kind of, I don't know. It feels like it's checking boxes. This movie is just like, we're taking that story and we're telling a cool, we're going to make a movie. And I think it works largely because of that. I think Christopher Lee's performance is fun. He's not in this movie a lot. I was actually surprised by how little he's actually in it and how much he's mostly just hissing at people. He's not. There's like very little dialogue, like Christopher Lee dialogue. Like
I think
outside of the opening, 10 minutes? Like,
IMDb, the trivia's got it at 16 lines in the entire movie.
It's kind of weird.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not. That's not even a knock. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. But he's Christopher Lee, and I guess when you think of Christopher Lee now, you're like, you want to hear him talk. So, I mean, I guess that's kind of a criticism, if I have to lob any criticism at it, but it's almost unfair because Christopher Lee wasn't Christopher Lee back then, right? Like, he wasn't...
No, this is... Peter Cushing was probably the
bigger star.
The bigger star. Christopher Lee had done a lot of bit parts. He was also in the war as well.
Yeah.
World War II, and he had done a lot of bit parts, and then his kind of big break was in The Curse of Frankenstein as Frankenstein's monster the year before, and that led him, and he only got that job because he was tall, pretty much.
Yeah, amazing. So I hope he has more to do in the subsequent Hammer Dracula movies that he stars in. I will say this. I really enjoyed it overall. I have a feeling it's not the best that Hammer has to offer. I think that this is a nice prototype for what I expect these future Hammer movies that I will be watching to give me. I had a lot of fun with it. I think it's probably one of the better adaptations of Dracula that I've seen. Cushing rules. Peter Cushing rules. I think he might be my new favorite Van Helsing.
Okay.
I think he might be. I mean, Hugh Jackman's a tough act to follow. Yeah.
Imagine, yeah.
He might be my favorite Van Helsing. I'm trying to think. I'd have to think about that. Hopkins is really good in Coppola's movie.
Yeah.
But, Guy Cushing rules in this.
We might have to throw Coppola's movie on the list to do sometime.
Yeah.
Because
it's a fascinating film.
Yeah, I need to, but we should space it out probably from this, but I would like to watch that one. So, yeah.
Me too. Yeah. So Cushing rules. I think the supporting cast is great. Michael Goh's great. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. And I think, I didn't love it, but I loved what it did for me in terms of making me feel that feeling of discovery. And I am excited now to remove that blind spot from my horror knowledge and watch more of these Hammer films. And I think that is as big a praise as I can give it, is this has made me interested in watching the rest, as many of them as possible. The problem is they're not free on any streaming.
They used to, you've got to.
That's what I'm bummed about, is I don't want to rent all of them.
Remember them around. Keep an eye out around Halloween time, those October times, because I found a ton of them on HBO Max and Peacock as well. Peacock had them up for free, a lot of them as well. So keep an eye out because they had it on the free tier too, I think, on Peacock because they have that ad tier. Yep. So keep an eye out because that's when a lot of your streaming services now put those older classic horror movies up. So
okay, that's good to know because I was scrolling through and I'm like, man, I hope there's some Hammer stuff on Amazon Prime. Not that I don't like. It's not that I mind, but like Hammer's catalog is ridiculous.
Even and
so I it's like $4 a movie, and I'm like, that's gonna add up quick. Like, man, oh man, I don't know.
I watched this one again, and I know what you're saying because as I was going through, because I've got a list of the sequels we'll talk a little bit about later, but there are still a couple I have not seen of the Dracula series, and I'm like, man, I need to fill those in, and then I'm like, oh, God. $3.
Yeah, what the hell?
But because I was looking all over to see if like maybe Peacock threw them up.
It makes you miss the 2-for-1 section at Family Video, doesn't it?
Yeah. So cool. So you enjoyed your time.
I did. I very much did.
Castle Dracula.
And I think if you're like me and you've got a Hammer blind spot, give this a shot. And I think you'll be pleasantly surprised, and I think you might be interested in kind of I don't know, instead of dipping your toes in, maybe taking the dive. You know. Yeah.
No, and part of the reason because you asked me, and I kind of picked this one on the spot. I think this is a good early example of what Hammer would become later on, and it's a good mix of, and it's a good entry point because it doesn't throw you. I think you might have fun with some of the Dracula sequels a little bit more later because they do get a little trashier, and they do get a little bit, and they even get a little bit more violent as they go along. And I think some of the Frankenstein sequels are also kind of fun. And there's some good Hammer horror stuff out there, but I picked this one because it is kind of a good template of that and a good early example, and I think a good entry point for that. And it doesn't throw you like right in the deep end like some of the other stuff.
Like Dracula 1972.
I mean, 1972.
I heard that's pretty good.
Because there is kind of that there is sex into that kind of sex that Hammer is known for, but it's more about the tension between like Victorian era values and sex in this one, and it's also about what Dracula does to these ladies as well. And there's a little bit of violence. This was one of the more violent movies ever released at the time. So there is that as well, especially when it comes to but that sex and violence that Hammer kind of became a little bit known for towards the end of its run is there, but it's not as pronounced as it would become later. So cool. Okay, let's just go through some characters real quick. We talked a little bit about Christopher Lee. As you mentioned, he, as Count Dracula, he doesn't have a lot to say in this movie.
No, he's menacing.
Yeah, and I think the big one to compare him to at the time would be Lugosi, and he's a different Dracula than Lugosi. Would you say Christopher Lee was a big fan of the Stoker novel, and he always tried to work references in throughout his Dracula. Would you say he's closer to the book than Lugosi?
Yeah,
he is. Yeah, I don't think he's
especially early in the film.
Right.
He becomes a bit. He just kind of becomes a monster towards the end, and there is that element certainly in the Stoker novel. It's not like that's not like Dracula is a monster. He's considered a universal monster for a reason, right? Like he is a monster, but Dracula is also a man, and also he's not like Frankenstein's monster or the Wolfman or the Creature from the Black Lagoon in the sense that the animalistic side of him is always under some level of control by a humanistic side of him as well. He's thinking and he's plotting and he's got a scheme. And most other monsters that you think about don't have a scheme. They're agents of chaos, right? In a way, in one way or another. So I guess Frankenstein's monster kind of schemes. That depends on which version you're talking about. But Dracula is a monster, but also a manipulator and a seducer. And I think that Lee is able to capture those elements. I think it's because he's a fine actor. I prefer Lee's over Lugosi's mostly, I'll be honest. I love.
Who is your favorite Dracula? Do you think now that
my favorite Dracula?
Yeah.
Oh,
sorry to put you on the spot, but I am curious now that we've talked a little bit about it. Yeah.
I have a favorite vampire performance. I don't know that I have a favorite Dracula performance.
Okay.
Dominic Purcell in Blade 3.
Okay.
Obviously. No, I don't know what my favorite. I mean, Gary Oldman's really great in that Coppola movie, but is it my favorite Dracula? I don't know. I don't think it is. I'd have to think on that, man. Leslie Nielsen.
In Dead and Loving It? Yeah, there you go.
That's the answer. So, yep, that's it. I do need to watch the line. I think the answer is, honestly, I think the answer is Langella, Frank Langella, but I haven't seen the movie yet.
You just like him as Dracula.
But he's Frank Langella.
You should watch that movie. Maybe we'll throw that. We'll just start throwing in Dracula movies because I would like to watch that one too because that one also has. I like that movie, but I know a lot of people do not.
Yeah, I'm 100% going to watch it. Yeah, I've heard it's very steamy.
Yeah.
Lots of half-button shirt Langella.
Very much so, yes.
It's like it was made for me. Yeah, so no, I think Christopher Lee is great. I am, and I mentioned it before, I'm anticipating getting some more material, hopefully, whether it's good or bad, I don't care. Getting some more material for Christopher Lee to chew on a little bit in the following movies. And I guess you could tell me whether or not that's the case. You've seen some of them.
Quite a few of them, yeah. And he does get more to do in some of it, but it's weird. Lee has a strange relationship with the character where he didn't love playing the character, and I think a lot of it stems from kind of Lugosi and what happened to him late in his career, where he became synonymous with Dracula, and it was tough for him to get other parts, and Lee didn't want that to happen. I
know he was worried about being typecast, but he kept making these because he was a decent guy, it sounds like, and like he knew that they were like him being a part of these productions was going to give people work. He
was the selling point to American audience after the first movie. He was that Dracula at the time. So there's a story, and I think you've touched on a little bit. There's a story he has told about how he went to, and I think this kind of sums up his performance as Dracula. He went to a New York showing of the movie.
And Horror of Dracula?
Yes, of this movie. And when he first shows up, the audience laughed at him. And I think a lot of it kind of, it's a very theatrical entrance, but it's also kind of, Lugosi's Dracula is very campy. And audiences familiar with that version kind of I can see how they would get a chuckle. But as the movie went on, he said people became silent and a little bit scared by him because he is much more menacing.
But that's kind of how I always envisioned Dracula. Not vampires, but Dracula. Like that character, that specific. He should be inviting. And he should there should be an awkward charm about him, right? I mean, this is a guy who's living in his castle 99.9% of the time and secluded and alone, and he's going to be a little socially awkward and make you a little uncomfortable, and I don't know. There's going to be a goofiness to him.
Right.
And a disarming quality to him. And what I think is cool about Dracula as a character
he's a man that wears a cape, too.
Yeah, he's being a count alone is funny.
Yeah.
But no, I think
he's been a count again.
Yeah.
Really. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
That's true. That's right. Jeez, I forgot. Cushing and Lee were both involved in that franchise. What I think is cool about the disarming quality that is then of course replaced by this kind of horror and fear is that you don't know how much of it is premeditated when it comes to the Dracula. Like, because he is a manipulator and he is kind of a schemer, you wonder how much of that disarming is an act and how much is actually just like the fact that he's a weirdo. Like, he's been alive for, like, you would be kind of weird. Right? Yeah. So...
Okay, let's move on then to Peter Cushing as Dr. Van Helsing. You mentioned you loved him
he's great.
In this. Yeah. I mean, the first scene we see him, he's ordering a brandy, which is absolutely what Dr. Van Helsing and Peter Cushing would be drinking. Yeah, I like him quite a bit in this movie, too. He's in a few of the sequels as well. I like Peter Cushing. And he was kind of the star at the time of this release. A lot of those Hammer horror movies, and especially some of the Dracula series, were built around these two actors, and they're kind of important. So you're a big fan of Peter Cushing as Dr. Van Helsing. You think he's your favorite?
Oh, I think so. He rules. I think he's great. I think he's absolutely. He just Cushing's got a presence on screen that it's one of those intangible things. Like when as soon as he's on screen, you're like, who is this guy?
Right. There's like almost like an authority, like a class to him.
There is. He commands the room, and that's why he's so great as Tarkin, which I think is his probably most well-known role. Honestly, is is Grand Moff Tarkin in the original Star Wars. He commands a room, and he. What I like about his Van Helsing is he is what I've always kind of envisioned Van Helsing as, having read that book. He is one part scholar and one part mercenary. He's both. He's very Indiana Jones in a way, which I like. But he's very focused on vampires as opposed to maybe just I got to find the next cool treasure.
This thing does get kind of swashbuckly though, especially towards the end.
It does.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like a full-on action movie, but there are some adventure
close,
elements towards the end. Yes, and he pulls that off, I think.
Yeah, I think he does. Yeah, and I like what I like about his Van Helsing is you get the feeling that he genuinely cares about these characters. He cares about what happens to Mina. He cares about what happened to Jonathan Harker. He cares about the plight of the people that Dracula is killing, reanimating, whatever. But he's also a man of science, and he knows how to turn off that emotional attachment and that level when the time comes to it, when he has to get the job done.
Right.
Like he's just a cool character, and Cushing does him justice. That's the most important thing. So, yeah.
Yeah, I don't have a ton of extra. So let's move on to John Van Eysen as Jonathan Harker. Jonathan Harker, he's never been my favorite character. He's always been a bit of a dweeb.
He's the wet blanket of the of the heroes in Dracula.
No, yeah, real quick on Jonathan though, what I like about this movie, and I think you talked about a little bit too earlier though, is it kind of sets it up as similar to the novel where he's writing his diary and stuff.
The memoirs.
And then it kind of pulls the rug out from under you. The first 20 minutes of this movie, I think it's a very clever screenplay and a very clever trick, almost like a Scream.
If you're familiar with the
Psycho.
novel, yeah.
Yeah, where it sets it up as like, oh, this guy's going to be your main character. Oh, wait, no, he's not. Like, he's out of the movie, and we've got Van Helsing here. He's the main character, actually.
I think that's really cool. I think it's interesting, and I think that was a very smart way to cut back on trim the fat off of the story of Dracula, because Harker's a very important character in that first act, basically, because he sets up Dracula and what he is and what he's aiming for. But after that, he's really not. He's kind of just. He always kind of feels like a sixth wheel to me. Like,
yeah,
he's like, not that he's the dweeb. Van Helsing and the other suitors are way cooler in the book than Harker. I also like the kind of reveal / element they throw in here of Harker, I guess being like an agent of Van Helsing. Like,
oh yeah, he knows.
He goes into it like knowing what.
That's a cool little
Dracula
wrinkle
is.
as well. Like, yeah, he's not just there.
He's there to kill him.
What's his deal? He's there to like catalog his books and then
yeah. Well, I think in the original novel, he's there to like do some sort of
he's like a bookkeeper,
library, like librarian thing.
Yeah. I've never really understood it, honestly. But in this movie, he like from the get go, he's like, I'm onto this guy.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
No, he knows what's up, and I think he's planning on offing Dracula. Like he's like, I got to stop him, and he fails. I mean, and I think that's cool too. I like that idea that he's some sort of protege of Van Helsing. Which is it's just a cool twist on it. It's a spin. I like that.
Michael Gough as Arthur Homewood and Melissa Stibling as Mina. What? So a couple things real quick on Michael Gough. Is it Gough? Go?
I always say go, but I don't know. Yeah.
It's weird seeing
him young.
I grew up with him as Alfred from Batman. I watched him a billion times in the first two Batman. Well, and I guess he's in the first four, right?
Yeah.
So I watched him a billion times in those four movies.
He is Alfred for me still.
Me too.
Yeah, I mean, like, I love Michael Caine.
Yeah.
Jeremy Irons was pretty good, actually.
Yep.
I'm sure Serkis is going to be good in this new one.
Right.
But, like, I think Alfred's always going to be Michael Gough for me, or Michael Gough for me. Yeah, like always. Period.
He reminded me of the TV show in some ways. He reminded me of the comics in some ways, the cartoon. But it's like when you like see pictures of your parents as young people, or in a video, and you see them like dancing and moving, and you're like, oh my god, they like before I existed, they had a life.
Yeah, like Michael Gough had sex. Right.
Yes, but I don't know if he did, because his lady in this one seems to be way more into Dracula.
Yeah, she does.
And
this is where things get a little muddy for me, because this is where we remix, because Jonathan Harker's taken out of the picture so early, we remix some characters here.
Right.
So instead of Mina being the love interest of Harker, Lucy is the love interest of Harker, right, in this?
Right.
And Mina is now the wife of... Now Lucy's aunt.
Arthur, yes, and Lucy's aunt.
Which is different
and,
than the book.
And Dracula gets us on both.
Yeah, well, that's Dracula style, baby. He's very Gabriel Byrne in End of Days.
Exactly.
He likes everybody in the family. Yeah. No, Michael Gough is great. I think he's very good in this. I think he works as kind of an in-between, where he's kind of just a regular Joe who's thrust into this crazy world that Van Helsing lives in day to day.
Yeah.
He's forced to come to grips with what Dracula is, what Van Helsing is, and what he has to do to save his family, protect his wife, save his wife. Because you didn't bring her up yet, but like Lucy...
We can just talk about her. We'll
Lucy
talk about
dies
all
early,
three of them. Yeah.
Too. Like she's I mean, and she is really fitting the Mina character from the book, I think, is what she...
Yeah.
I get all mixed up here. Mina in the book is the love interest of Jonathan Harker. In this one, it's Lucy. So if I'm mixing that up, I apologize. There's a lot going on with those character names. But she gets killed as well, which is an area where we kind of deviate from the book and from the source material, and like you said, almost kind of like pull the rug out from under people who might be familiar with the story, which I really think is cool. That's one thing that an adaptation can do that I think is worthwhile without upsetting your audience. If you can find cool ways to kind of surprise them while keeping the spirit of the source material alive, I think that's worthwhile.
Just real quick, I wanted to look it up while you were to verify
please,
for
yes,
you.
please.
So you're right. She is engaged to Jonathan Harker in the novel. She's best friends with Lucy Westenra.
They're best friends.
Yes, they're best friends.
Yes.
And so they switch it to where she is now.
Lucy is killed in the novel. She's turned into a vampire about halfway through the novel, I think. And Mina, I believe, survives till the end. I believe that she's because she's kind of the maybe a reincarnation of Dracula's bride or something.
Right.
He's kind of in love with her. And they hinted that in this when he picks up the photo. He wants to see the photo of Harker's fiance or wife or whatever. And they kind of hint that they're going that direction, and then they don't. But when it comes to all these characters, I mean, Michael goes the stand-up, but like the Lucy and Mina, Lucy's kind of I don't know. She doesn't do a lot. She's kind of damsel in distress-y, and she is killed relatively early. Her when Van Helsing has to stake her, it's pretty brutal though.
Yeah, and that's the stuff I like about Van Helsing too. Is he's very pragmatic about it. He's like we're not going to save her.
No,
we've got to make sure she's dead.
And that's what I mean. Like he understands, like up to a certain point, like he cares, and he's a good guy. Mm-hmm. And he's there to save people and help people first and foremost. But the second that the line is crossed past the point of no, he's like, no, we gotta kill him. Like there's no.
She's not who she was.
No, there's no hesitation. Yeah, and that's where the scientist comes into play, right?
Yep.
Yeah, and I love that. That sequence is pretty intense actually, and I can see why this movie was considered so violent, like back when it was released. Like, whoa, like he's staking her and she's like screaming. And
that and the Dracula death at the end, which I think was edited out in some versions. I'm not sure, but the one that we watched, the Prime,
was very cool.
Yeah, it's really cool, really and cool. Also, a little bit intense. I would have, for a movie of that time.
Yeah, for that time, jeez, yeah. He's like turning to dust.
Yeah.
I don't have a ton to say about the rest of the characters. I'll be honest about those characters. I mean. they all serve their roles. I'm happy to see that Mina survives as well. That was cool. I like the idea of the blood transfusion, and I think that's a neat concept, and it works for me. I think you have to have somebody make it out, right?
Yeah.
Somebody get, there's a lot of death in this movie, but yeah.
I think these three, though, are where the interesting kind of sexual stuff comes into play.
Sure.
I mean, the stuff with Dracula and Lucy, I mean, she's 19 years old in this movie. He essentially, she becomes a woman after one night with him, as how we see it. Is she, like, that's kind of her birth into womanhood, is when he throws his cape up. And
there's a loss of virginity kind of, I guess, allegory or metaphor going on there.
Right.
There's a rape, a bit of a rape metaphor going on there. There is, it is interesting. I mean, but vampires have always had that kind of that quality, right?
Yes, they've always been kind of sexual, and Mina's the other one in this, and it's cut out in, I think, the Prime version, and I think it's in one of the, but there is, or I didn't catch it this time at least, but in one of the versions of it, like, you can tell when she's with Dracula, she's enjoying it, and her direction, the actress's direction from the director, like, the next morning when you see her, is like, act like you just had the best sex of your life, like the night before. So that's how she's playing it.
There's a ton of that in this, not the version I watched.
Yeah, I think the one when she re-enters, and you kind of see her, like, that's when you see, like, oh, she
very satisfied.
Yeah, satisfied in a way that Michael Gough cannot do. So.
Well, I mean, it's Christopher Lee. Look at the guy. I mean,
yeah, so, okay, I don't have any more. Real quick here, I wanted to mention Terrence Fisher and Jimmy Sangster.
Sure.
Terrence Fisher directed 29 Hammer film productions, and he directed The Curse of Frankenstein, Horror of Dracula, The Revenge of Frankenstein, How to Baskervilles, and The Mummy, just a ton of them. So he's incredibly important. He directed this one. And also, Jimmy Sangster, who was the writer, he kind of set the template for these Universal remakes that they did with this one, Curse of Frankenstein, and The Mummy. He would also direct the Horror of Frankenstein in 1970, which was kind of, I believe this is the one that was supposed to be kind of a reboot of the Frankenstein series, too. So those two are incredibly important when it comes to talking about Hammer horror and horror in general. So, all right.
Excellent.
I'm going to give you a quick run through of these sequels, and I'm just going to let you, maybe what you could do is make mental notes or even audible notes on which ones you want to. Are you
going through an order of the release?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
So the next one up after this is The Brides of Dracula, and it's about a school teacher arriving in Transylvania and in the sights of Baron Meester. There is no Dracula in this. Chris Lee is not in this.
Okay.
And I have seen this one. His presence is...
Is Cushing in this?
Yeah.
Excellent.
Oh, wait.
I'm in.
Wait, is Peter Cushing in this
If
one?
Cushing's in it, I'm in.
Yeah, I believe he's in this. And
if he's not, I'm kind of...
Now you're testing my memory.
No, it's okay.
Which one is this? Brides of Dracula, right?
The Brides, yes. The Brides of Dracula.
I want to make sure he's in this.
If Cushing's in it,
it's like a smaller role. He is in this one. David Peel, though, is Baron Meester, who's kind of the stand-in for Dracula, and he is no Christopher Lee. But I think where you might like this one is kind of messy. I do like it. It's probably Hammer's best-looking movie that I've seen, at least.
I want to say Horror of Dracula is a good-looking movie.
Yes.
Like, man, oh, man. The copy on... good gravy. The copy on Prime, I don't know what remastering or version of this, that like physical release-wise this was, but
it's really good.
God, does it look good.
All of their... Yeah.
It's beautiful. The sets are beautiful.
Yeah.
The lighting is beautiful. The costume design is this is top-notch. Like, it's not Hollywood filmmaking, but this is top-notch classic filmmaking, and like, to see, like, a lot of the time watching movies, I'll be honest, remastered, I appreciate the upgrade in picture quality. There's an obvious, I mean, you get rid of some of the graininess and some of the less refined elements, but like, I don't often with remastered movies go like, wow, that felt like a different movie. It happens on occasion, but with this, I was like, I can't believe this movie is from 1958.
Yes.
Like, it looks so good. It looks like a decade, maybe 2 decades later than, and that's a compliment, like a huge compliment. Yeah, it looked great.
Yeah, I'm really mad at myself for forgetting to mention that, but that's another thing they're known for is kind of that Technicolor. They were like Curse of Frankenstein was one of the first kind of color horror movie, and not color movie, color horror movie. There had been sequences before, like there's a sequence in Phantom of the Opera, one of the early Phantom of the Opera movies, where like there's the staircase sequence, and so, but they are known for kind of their bright, kind of vibrant colors, and that's where that blood comes into play too.
Yeah,
that color of blood. And I'm glad you mentioned the sets too, because the set designer, whose name is escaping me right now, but he was a part of the reason they're so successful because they filmed them at Bray Studios, is what it was called.
Okay.
And they reused a lot of sets, and you can see the sets throughout the films. Like a lot of these sets, you can tell are in Curse of Frankenstein.
Yeah,
and that saved them a bunch of money.
Whatever.
Yep. Next up, Dracula, Prince of Darkness. This is Lee's return to the series. This is a good one. Four travelers show up to House Dracula. Dracula's assistant resurrects him. It's a very gory bloodletting scene. This is like one of the goriest moments.
Okay. Hey, you got me.
Yes.
I'm in. Cushing?
This one I do
also
believe.
back?
No, this. Oh, you know what though? This one does not have Van Helsing in it, but it's got Father Sandor, who had his own comic strip after this.
Sick.
And he's sweet. He's not Peter Cushing, I will grant you that, but he's really cool. Okay. So this is a good one. It's got Chris Lee back as well. Okay, so now it gets spotty after the first three for me, so I cannot tell you.
That's fine.
Dracula has risen from the grave. I have not seen this one. This is the one you mentioned a little earlier. Hammer needed Dracula at this point, especially Christopher Lee, and they begged him to come back, and he did not want to. But they basically told him, like, hey, everybody's going to lose their job. They guilted him into this by telling him, like, everybody's going to...
That's so sad.
Yeah. This one is, from what I gather, this is one of the hornier ones. Tons of cleavage.
Hell yeah.
It's bloodier and gorier.
Sweet.
It looked like it might be kind of cool. But it's kind of funny. As Dracula's series kind of mirror where Hammer went to as they went with the blood and gore. Taste the Blood of Dracula is next, so this would be number 5. Hammer was cranking these out at this point. They were big money makers, especially in the U.S. They originally wanted a movie with a new actor for Dracula, but the people with the money said, no, we want Chris Lee back. This one I have seen, actually. It's very randy, very horny. And,
I'm noticing a trend.
Yeah, this is one of those, this is like the New Blood type of, like it's one of those late sequels that I kind of like in a late sequel way.
I gotcha.
Where there's not a ton memorable like about it, but I kind of like it. Scars of Dracula. Remember how I said they were cranking her up? This one was released the same year.
Oh, my.
Yeah, it was a double feature with Horror of Frankenstein, which I talked about was another attempt. I don't think I have not seen this one, honestly.
Okay.
But this is the time when Hammer lost their U.S. distributor in Warner Brothers. So this is where we're getting into the downfall of Hammer. Dracula AD 1972. I have seen this one. This is the modern day Dracula. Lee hated bringing him into modern times. You got to watch this one actually, because this one has a sweet opening fight scene between Van Helsing and Dracula.
Is Cushing in this too?
Yeah, and Cushing's in this, and he plays Van Helsing's descendant later in 1972. I like this one. It's incredibly campy and silly. This one's a lot of fun.
Okay.
The next one is we have 2 more here. The Satanic Rites of Dracula. I've also seen this one, and it sucks. This is like, it's got a cool premise. It's like a spy movie with Dracula in it. Dracula's a Bond villain in this, basically. This sounds sweet, but it's boring as hell.
I can see that, though.
And he would have a better Bond villain performance as an actual Bond villain, Christopher Lee.
Yeah.
So, the problem with like kind of both of the movies is they started to feel less and less like Hammer horror. And the last Hammer horror, no Christopher Lee in it. No. Oh yeah, this one does have Van Helsing. I have not seen this one. I really want to. This is The Legend of the 7 Golden Vampires. So this was released around the same time as the.
Is Cushing in this thing?
Cushing is in this thing.
My God.
This was released around the same time, like kind of kung fu movies were kind of blowing up.
Oh no.
Yeah. I have not seen this one. This was there seems to be like an action scene with Peter Cushing doing.
Oh no!
Yeah. This was not released in the U.S. right away. It kind of.
I will be watching this.
Hurt them financially. I have not seen this. So, There you go.
Amazing.
We talked.
Christopher Lee also did a couple of non-Hammer vampire or Dracula movies, by the way.
Yeah, I've not seen these.
Which is insane.
Yeah.
But he did.
So, as we get into the 60s, just a real quick wrap up Hammer. The cracks begin to show in the Hammer films. A lot of historians point to the failure of Phantom of the Opera in 1962 that the first time as it was failing. But the sequels got a little bit spotty as well. The other thing that we mentioned a little bit, Bray Studios and the set designer Bernard Robinson and his reuse of sets. When he kind of went away and they moved out of Bray Studios, they got away from that. Basically, Hammer got too big for their britches in a lot of ways. They were making or trying to make too many films that were either not successful or didn't get made. For example, a lot of people point to, there was a movie called Nessie, the Loch Ness Monster, which was supposed to be a co-production with Toho, who did, of course, the Godzilla movies.
Yeah.
And it was supposed to be a big monster movie, but a lot of the investors pulled out after the 1976 version of King Kong failed. And that's kind of pointed to as kind of the death blow for Hammer Horror. But it wasn't just that. Horror was changing as well, and Hammer tried to keep up with the times with more explicit sex and violence, as you can kind of see as the Dracula movies go on. But once stuff like Texas Chainsaw Massacre hit, like, what are you going to do with?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just audiences had changing tastes.
Mm-hmm.
So weirdly enough, they had kind of become old-fashioned like the Universal Monsters in the sense. Hammer's final production was a remake of Alfred Hitchcock's A Lady Vanishes, starring Elliot Gould and Sybil Shepherd, and it was not well received. They would return in 2008, the brand name would, and they've released some decent flicks. Let Me In, The Woman in Black. Yep. The Lodge just came out a couple years ago. So
yeah, Let Me In I liked a lot,
yeah.
Maybe even more than Let the Right One In, which is interesting.
Yep.
But I think I like it better. And actually, Woman in Black I like quite a bit too. So,
and I think those movies do a decent job of kind of capturing that Gothic Victorian era, like all that kind of
and that's
Hammer
the important
sense.
thing is that Hammer as a film company had a vibe, and as long as whatever you're putting under the banner fits that kind of that general vibe, I think it's great. I think keep it up. There's not a lot of film companies, I think, that have that. Blumhouse is the most recent I can think of that. Their movies all tend to have a certain... You can tell it's a Blumhouse movie.
Yeah.
There's a vibe. So. And
I think... this is it's a Scorsese quote, actually. And a lot of the information I pulled is from a couple of different books.
Is Scorsese a Hammer fan?
Yeah.
Excellent. Excellent.
But this is from... There's a really... And I think you can watch it on YouTube. It's called The Studio That Dripped Blood, Hammer Horror. But it says... In my early teens, I went with groups of friends to go and see certain films. If we saw the logo of Hammer Films, we knew it was going to be a very special picture. A surprising experience usually, and shocking. And I bring that up because Hammer belongs with like the Universal Monster movies, like those MGM musicals. And honestly, I think you could, Marty might not like this, you could throw in the Marvel Studios movies too. Like when you go to a Hammer movie, when you go to one of these types of movies, these studios, there's a certain thing you're expecing. And there's a certain thing you're going to get, and those best movies delivered that experience. And he talks about it like when he was a kid, too, going and knowing kind of what you're going to get and what you're looking for. And I think Hammer is kind of one of those flashpoints in movie history where you knew what a studio was going to put out.
There's something to be said for either a film series or a film company or whatever that delivers that you kind of know what you're going to get going into it. There's a reason why it's comfort food, right? Not everybody likes that kind of comfort food necessarily, but it's comfort food for the people who like it, and that's why I try not to crap on like the superhero stuff that's coming out right now because like it makes people feel good.
Yep.
You know? So it's and I think Hammer for a certain audience was probably that way. So it's cool. I think it's neat. That's why I like Friday the 13th so much, the franchise, because like that is that like they are exactly what you when you walk into a Friday the 13th movie, like you kind of know what you're going to get, but every time you're done with it, you feel fulfilled by it. You know, you feel kind of satiated by by the experience. So,
Cutest Couple.
Cutest Couple. You know, there's not a lot of couples in this one that you see on screen together. Yeah. But any couple that can go through a blood transfusion, where one member of the couple is giving blood to the other, is nice. So I'm going to go with Michael Gough and his wife.
You know what? I'm going to
I don't remember the names of the characters, but yeah.
My Cutest Couple, they're not a romantic couple.
Sure.
But I like, I think if we're talking about the cutest couple of characters when they work together, I'm talking about Van Helsing and Arthur Holmwood.
Oh, they're so sweet.
I like their little buddy cop chemistry that they have.
I like their carriage ride together.
Who's the class clown here? Who is the funniest in this movie? Who did you laugh at any certain character a bit?
I don't know that I did. I mean, like,
this is not a very funny movie.
No, it's not. Christopher Lee's pretty funny. Like, he's the class clown. It's Lee.
I laughed, so I'm going to nominate Arthur. Nobody's really funny. This is not a super funny movie, but I laughed really hard at the part where he blamed himself for not using Lucy as bait. He's like, "Why didn't I?
Done that.
I should have listened to you."
Stupid.
Most athletic.
I got to give this one to Van Helsing.
Yeah. That leap he makes at the end to like pull down the shades.
It's intense. It's intense, and he's not a spring chicken in this movie. Like, he's not like a young man, right?
Right.
So yeah, no, it's impressive. It's great stuff.
And I think their chase scene at the end, they both throw some athleticism. And I think the obvious choice might be Dracula, but you know what? He throws that those candlesticks at him. It's a bad throw. Like, it's
no, and Dracula kind of becomes a nerd too. Like, he just kind of like Van Helsing's like running across the table, not particularly fast.
Yeah.
And Dracula's just kind of like, he's kind of watching him. Do you remember those old wrestling? We brought wrestling video games earlier. I'm going to bring it up again. The old WWF wrestling video games where they would like your standard pose was this weird like arms bent thing.
Yeah, he does that a couple times.
He kind of just does that as Cushing is just murdering him. So yeah.
Two more here. Most likely to succeed. I'm going with Van Helsing because he's mostly, like, a lot of the time, he does succeed, and he's, like we mentioned, he's very pragmatic. He's just going to kill Lucy, too. Like, he's not going to try to save anybody. He's like, if they're gone, see you later. So he's my choice.
Yeah, no, he's the obvious choice, yeah. No, I would agree completely. He can make it happen.
Life of the party.
Oh, my.
It's got to be Dracula, right?
Or maybe, 100%.
Maybe to Lucy or Mina after they tear, but I think Dracula is.
No, it's Dracula. Do you know the kind of crazy? I mean,
have you ever partied with a person who like comes over and you're like, oh well, that person's getting laid tonight?
Oh yeah, it's Dracula. Yeah.
That's Dracula.
Yeah. No, my parents told a story one time of going to a party after a show my dad's band had played, and they were invited to this kind of like Halloween party or whatever. And they got there, and the entire house was painted black.
Yeah,
like the walls, the ceilings, and it was. Needless to say, my parents left very quickly.
Yeah,
and I like to think that was Christopher Lee, Dracula's house, just based on what I've heard of just the vibe. It was uncomfortable. So.
There you go. There are superlatives. Willie, what are we doing next time?
I don't know. I picked this one.
Oh, so this is my choice?
Technically, I picked it because I said Hammer. And then I said, Tim, you know more Hammer. So I think this is actually your choice.
All right, so.
I did have an idea if you can't think of anything. But it's your choice.
What is your idea?
It's been a while, and I'll be honest with you. I'm kind of itching for, like, to do, like, a Jason movie. Like,
oh, for sure, yeah. Okay.
I just we've had a drought of Jason content in life lately, so
we're gonna record before. So I think our schedule is gonna look like is we'll record the next one, and then I think maybe if you're down, we'll do some sort of like wrap up, or maybe even like live sort of thing. Ooh, we'll talk about some ideas to do at the convention.
We may be able to do something, but I would say that. The next episode we release will be...
It would be like the 18th is when it would come
right.
out.
So this will be a standard... nothing that there's anything wrong with that, of course, but be a standard movie episode, and then the following one will be some sort of Something about Horror Hound.
What's Jason you want to do? What's Jason you want to do?
That's the trick, right? So, what do you know what we've done on the show? Like, I don't think we've done any specific.
We've done brackets, but I don't. The only specific one, and I think we need to throw it out, is Manhattan, because we did that commentary episode for
right. We've also done, of course, our Fight the Franchise back during our Midwest Film Nerds days, but we never really focused on
one particular
Friday the 13th movie. So I'm going to throw Friday the 13th out there. I'm going to let you pick if you're down with that. I would prefer something in the first. I don't necessarily have a preference.
Do you want to go pre-design? Well, I don't want to. I'm kind of the only one of the later ones I'm thinking about is New Blood, but
I would be down for that. I'd also be down for the remake, if I'm being honest. But I'd like to go older, I think. Something pre-Zombie Jason.
Let's throw Roy out, too. I think we talked about Roy quite a bit.
There's what more can we say? Something in the first 4, then, I would say.
Let's do 3.
Friday the 13th Part 3 in 3D, yes.
Are you cool with that?
Now, we do know somebody who has a 3D Blu-ray player.
Okay. Should we hold off until we...
No.
Okay.
We could talk to the person and see if we could borrow something, maybe.
Okay.
Or whatever. We'll talk about it.
Well,
if we could make this happen...
Let's plan on doing 3.
Let's plan on doing 3. And if we can do it in 3D, I'd love to, Tim, because I've never seen it in 3D. True 3D.
I watched the remember the one that came, the box set that came with the glasses.
The shitty glasses, right.
The shitty glasses, and I remember my dad, I think I was living with my parents at the time. It was like post high school or college, whatever that came out. But anyway, I was living there for a little bit, and I was in the dark because I turned all of the lights off because I couldn't see anything. And he came downstairs to go to the bathroom, and he looked at me on the couch with my dorky glasses on, and he just goes, "Oh, son, you got to move out."
That was the moment.
The moment. He's like,
"You got to go.
I can't have you in this house anymore. If this is what's happening in my
too much.
living room after
That's
I go
amazing.
to sleep." So you're good with 3?
Yes.
Okay.
3 is one I think that is higher on your list than mine. It's not your favorite, right? But it's on the higher end.
Lives is my favorite, but I don't want to do that one. So.
No, I don't either. Okay, I'm excited. 3 is a weird one for me. It's like right in the middle of the pack. So
yeah,
I'm excited to rewatch.
Yeah, I remember really liking the
cool.
theme.
Excellent.
All right, so thank you. horrormovieyearbook@gmail.com. Did you go over this? I can't remember. No, because we interrupted. At HM Yearbook on Twitter, Horror Movie Yearbook on Facebook and Instagram, patreon.com/MidwestPodnet. And I think that's it. Yeah.
That's it.
Stay safe. Take care, everybody. Thank you for listening.